Hi guys, welcome back to iFashi. Today's tutorial will be teaching us how to cut and sew this beautiful dress with a slanted gathers on the down part. So the first thing we have here is our pattern paper on the table. Like I always say, remember to draft with a pencil so that you can easily clean it off when you make a mistake. I am drafting with this marker because of visibility. So the first thing I'm doing is to take 1 inch downwards from the beginning of my paper and mark it down. That will serve as my shoulder line. So all my measurement will be taken downwards from this shoulder line. So the first thing I'll do now is to take my bust point measurement, that is from your shoulder to your bust point. I'm using 9.5. Then I'll mark it and make a straight line on that point, and I'll label it bust, that's the B. And then the next thing I'll take is my under bust measurement. I'm using 13.5 inches. So I also mark that point and label it UB, which is the under bust. So after under bust, the next thing I would mark out is my waistline. Remember, your front waistline and your back waistline is not the same. So I'm using 17 inches for my front waistline, and I'll make a straight mark there and I'll label it W, which is my waist. Now from this waistline, I would take 9 inches downwards to get my hip line. So after marking that 9 inches, I'll make a straight line there and label it H. With that, we have our hip, waist, under bust and bust measurement. And the next thing I'll do now is to go up by 2 inches on my bust line to get my chest line. So after marking that 2 inches, I'll make a straight line there and label it C, which is my chest line. Now, the next thing we're going to do after this is to take my shoulder measurement. I'm taking my shoulder measurement on that shoulder line I marked earlier. And then I'll come downwards on that measurement by 1 inch for my shoulder slant. Now, after that, the same measurement I took on the shoulder line, I'll take it on the chest line so that I can have a straight line downwards on that my 1 inches shoulder slope. So after marking the straight line, I'll go ahead and take my neck measurement. I'm using 3.3 and I'll slant that 3.3 down to my shoulder slope, and then we have our chest box out. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to come to the bust line and take my nipple to nipple measurement. I'm using 4 inches, which is 8 inches divided by 2. So on my waistline, I'll come downwards by 6 inches, which is where the dart would end. So on that 6 inches, I'm taking my nipple to nipple measurement as well, which is 4 inches. And then I'll mark a straight line all the way up to the bust line from that place. So the next thing we'll do now is to get out the bust parts. We'll go to the under bust, come outwards by 2 inches. You can use 1.5 if you're not busty. So 1.5 is what I use here. So after taking that 1.5 or 2 inches, you use your curve rule to curve it upwards to the bust line. So now the next thing we're going to do after that is to divide what we have on this shoulder slope downwards by 2. I'm using my tape to divide it. I'll mark the midpoint, which is where I would curve this bust to using my curve ruler. So after marking out that curve, you can see the bust part is coming out. But one more thing we need to do is to come downwards by 1 inch or 1.5. I use 1 inch or 1.5 sometimes, but if you're very busty, take 2 inches downwards. So the same thing you came down with, you go outwards with the same thing. So I went upwards again by 1 inch, then I'll now make another slant downwards to the bust line. With this, we'll take out these darts on our armhole side. So after doing that, we're going to take your bust measurement on the chest line, add 1 inch for your seam allowance, then curve it to this new to get your armhole from this point. So after getting out the armhole, now we have from the shoulder that would cut along with the center front, and we have this part that will cut along with the side front. So the next thing we'll do now is to extend this dart that we took on the under bust, extend it to the waist, and then slant it to that 6 inches we went down with. That will serve as the dart point of this dress. Now, after marking out this dart point, I'm going to asterisk it so that we'll know that we're cutting off this part. So after marking it up, the next thing I will do is to take all my measurements on the bodice. So you go to the bust line, take your bust measurement, add 1 inch or 2 inches, depends on the seam allowance that you use. I'm using 1 inch seam allowance, and then go to the under bust, take my under bust circumference. After marking it, I would replace this dart that we're taking away. I'll replace it there so we don't get short, and then I'll add my 1 inch for the seam allowance. We'll do the same thing on the waistline. Take your waist measurement divided by 4. Replace these darts that we took. If you use 2 inches, add 2 inches, and then add your 1 inch seam allowance. So that will be connected together all the way to the armhole from the waist. So with this, we've gotten out the side front. Now after this, the next thing we're going to do, remember I said the front waist measurement is different from your back nape to waist measurement. I use 17 for my front waist measurement, and my back waist measurement is 15.5. So that 1.5 difference, I'm going to remove it on this bust line. Come downwards with your difference on the bust line and slant it to this bust point. This will be a dart that will cut off. I'm marking it out so you know that we're going to cut it off. So by the time you cut this off, your back and your front will now be equal. So now let's go to the neckline. This, as you can see on your screen, this is the neckline that I will be using. It's a Queen Anne sleeve type of neckline, but with a straight chest. So I'm just going upward by 1 inch on my chest line because I don't want it to be too deep. If you want yours deep, leave it on the chest line. So I just went up by 1 inch and I did my slant from the neckline. So that's how I got my neckline. So that's for that. The next thing we'll go to now is the down part of this dress. Now we'll go to the hip line and take your hip measurement divided by 4 on that hip line, add your 1 inch seam allowance, and then we'll now curve it to meet up with the waist line. After doing that, we know that this dress has a slant from the hip. You can start your slant immediately from the hip line, or you can go downwards from your hip line. So as you can see on your screen, where you want your slant to start from totally depends on you. So from my waistline down, I want my side gathers to start from 14 inches. That's why I took 14 inches from the waistline and I made a point there. So I am not slanting on this paper. I would slant on the fabric after cutting so you don't make a mistake. So after marking it to this point, I will just use my ruler to do the connection and then take it down to the other end of the paper. As you can see on the screen, watch it closely. If you decide to slant on your paper, fine. I started the slanting on the paper, but before I started cutting on fabric, which I will still show you guys later, I realized that it is not advisable to slant on paper so that you don't end up having 2 slanted sides. So we are done with the front part of this dress. It is very simple. It is a basic princess dart dress. So I'm going to cut it out now, and then look closely how I'm cutting. I'm folding in that side that we took on the bust. I'll use my sellotape to close it down so that it will be firm. Then after closing that down, I'll cut off my center front. This center front, I'm going to extend it to the down part. Just watch closely how I'm doing it. After using sellotape to hold this bust dart firm, now you cannot see the dart anymore. So after holding it down, straighten your line on that part and then cut it off. Now after cutting this off, we're going to extend this dart. If you do not want to extend your dart, fine, but we're going to extend this dart on the paper so that we can separate the center front from the side front. So I continued with my bust nipple to nipple measurement all the way down. Then I removed the center front. I labeled it so I will not make a mistake, and then I labeled the side front as well. Now we are done drafting the front piece of this dress. So like I said earlier, this slanting should not be done on paper. It's not necessary because remember we're cutting on fold. We cut a fabric on fold. To avoid you having 2 slanted sides, we are going to cut straight on the fabric before we slant. I will show you how I went about that. So the next thing we're going to do now is to draft the back piece. So I'll introduce a plain paper, and then I'll repeat the same thing I did for the front. But this one, the first thing I'm going to do is to take my zipper allowance on the beginning of my paper. I use 1.5 zipper allowance, so from the beginning to the down part of the paper, I'll take 1.5 and use my straight ruler to make a straight rule there. After doing that, the same 1 inch I took at the beginning of my paper on the front, I would also take it here so that that point will serve as my shoulder line. Now after doing that, from that shoulder line, I'll start taking my measurements downwards. The first thing I took is my bust point, which is 9.5. After that, we'll go straight to take the waistline for the back, which is 15.5. My nape to waist is 15.5. I will mark a straight rule on the bust line and label it B, mark a straight rule on the waistline and label it W for the waist. After that, I'll go up by 2 inches from the bust line to get my chest line, and I'll mark a straight line there. Then on the waistline, I'll go down by 9 inches like I did for front to get my hip line. I'll mark a straight rule there and label it H, which is my hip line for the back. After doing that, the next thing we're going to do now is to go to the shoulder line and take our shoulder measurement. Remember to start taking your measurement from the zipper allowance. So I marked my shoulder measurement on the shoulder line and I came down by 1 inch for my shoulder slope. And then I took the same measurement on the chest line to get a straight rule up to that shoulder slope. And then I took my 3.3 for my neckline, came down by 1 inch for the back neck depth, and then I have my back neck taken. I extended it to the zip line. After that, we'll now come to divide what we have on this shoulder slope from the shoulder down to the chest line, divide it by 2 and mark the midpoint. After doing that, I'll take my bust measurement and add 1 inch for seam allowance, both on the chest line and on the bust line. Now after doing that, the next thing we're going to do is to start taking our dart. But before we take the dart, we need to come down on the bust by 1 inch. Come down on the bust line by 1 inch and then start taking your nipple to nipple measurement on that 1 inch. But for this back, I use 5 for my nipple to nipple measurement. Like that's your nipple to nipple measurement plus 1 inch because this is back. Now remember, for the waistline, we went down by 6 inches to extend our dart. So I went down on the waistline by 6 inches and I extended my dart to that point. So I'll mark out the dart bust that we'll be cutting out for this back. Now from the end of these darts, we use our curve rule to connect up to this shoulder line that we divided by 2 to get the midpoint. So from that midpoint of that shoulder, we'll slant it to meet the bust part and then get your armhole from that point as well. And after doing that, go ahead and take your body measurement on your lines. On the waistline, I took my waist measurement divided by 4. I replaced this dart that we're cutting off, and then I added my 1 inch seam allowance. Then on the hip line, we're going to take our hip measurement and then add 1 inch for seam allowance. That's what we'll extend back up to the waistline. So now I've introduced my front piece that we've drafted before, just to make sure the hip line ends in the same point. So I measured it and I checked it's correct before I used my curve ruler to curve out my hip line all the way from the waist down to the length where the front pattern ended as well. Now before we go ahead and cut out this back pattern, I'm going to extend my dart measurements all the way down to the end of the dress so that I can separate my center back from the side back. So I'm extending my dart by taking the same nipple to nipple measurement I used before to extend the dart. And then I'll now label my center back, side back, and asterisk the part that will cut off as the dart. And that will be all for the back. Very, very simple and straight to the point. So I introduced the front piece for you to see that they are equal after folding in this side bust darts. So from the armhole to the down part of the dress is equal. They are all aligned. So I'll now go ahead and cut. But before I cut, there's a secret to zip budging that I found out. So on this zipper allowance on the waist, you're going to come in by 0.5. Aside the nape to waist manipulation, this is another tip to eliminate zip bulging. So you're going to come inwards on your waistline on the zipper allowance part, come inwards by 0.5. Use a straight rule to slant all the way to the upper part and to the down part. So you will cut off that 0.5 from the zipper allowance, and that will totally eliminate any element of zip bulging. And with that, we're done with the back and front drafting of this dress. So the next thing we'll be drafting now is our sleeve. If you don't know how to draft a basic short sleeve, watch and learn. So I have my paper on fold, and then I came down by 0.5 on top of the paper to get a straight line where I'll be taking all my measurements from. So the first thing I'll do is to mark out 4.5 inches. That 4.5 inches is from the shoulder to my bicep, the biggest part of your arm. So I'll write it down, bicep, and then I'll now take the length, your desired length of your short sleeve, wherever you want it to end. If you want it to get to your elbow, measure from your shoulder to your elbow and put down what you have there. So that's what I just measured, and I marked it elbow/length, because that is the length of the sleeve I'm drafting. So the next thing I'm going to do is to come inwards on the first shoulder line I drew by 4 inches. On that 4 inches point, come down by 2 inches. Why did I come down by 2? Because I divided what I have from my shoulder to the bicep, I divided it by 2. If you took 4, you have 2. If you took 5, you have 2.5. So after dividing it by 2, I use my curve ruler to make a curve downwards to that point, and then I'll bend the curve ruler the other way around to bring out my armhole curve. If you don't understand my explanation, watch the video closely. I'll take it again. I came inwards by 4.5 inches, and then I divided what I have from the shoulder to the bicep by 2. I made a point there, used my curve ruler to curve it down and curve it the other way. And then after that, measure what you have on that point if it aligns with your armhole measurement. Take your elbow circumference, divide it by 2, mark it there, and then slant it to the armhole that we took already. And that's all for the basic sleeve. Basic sleeve, short sleeve, long sleeve, very, very easy. So now, after drafting out this basic sleeve, this is the type of sleeve I've been doing on this dress. The sleeve you're seeing on your screen is cap sleeve, very small. So what I just did is come down by 3 inches. I came down by 3 inches, but after sewing, I'll have 2.5. So I will use 0.5 to sew. So after coming down, I use my curve ruler to connect it to the armhole point, and then that is all for the cap sleeve that I'll be doing. As you see, the pattern I'm holding looks just like the sleeve you're seeing on the screen. So that will be that for the drafting of this dress. The sleeve is out, the back and the front is out. The next thing we'll do now is to go ahead and cut out on fabric. Here is the fabric I'll be using. The plain part will be used for the upper part, while the patterned fabric will be used for the down pleated part of this dress. So remember I told you earlier the slanting will be done when we are cutting. So watch closely and see how I'm cutting it. The first thing I'm going to do is to pin down your pattern to your fabric. Secure it with a pin so that it doesn't start shifting about when you start cutting. So after securing it down with a pin, repeat the same thing on the side front as well. So now remember the slanting we said will be done on the fabric. Use your tape to measure the full length. When I mean the full length, I mean the full length of the slanted part. The slanted part of the upper dress is longer than the beginning of the slant. So that is what you use to cut. After joining, you can now slant it. So that's why I decided to show the cutting part so that you can see how I cut it. Cut in full, do not cut slanted. If you cut slanted, your fabric is on fold. It will not go one way. The slanting will be in the middle. So this is what we have. I've cut my sleeve and I've also interfaced it with my hair stay. I did the same thing on the front. I did the same thing on the back. So this sleeve I'm holding right here is cut into, I cut 4. because I'll use one to turn the other. The material is what I'll use for the lining as well. That's why I cut out 4 pieces. Now for the center front, I cut out 2 pieces because I'll use one to lining the other. So the back as well, cut 2 pieces. If you're using a different fabric for lining, go ahead and do that. So we're done with the cutting, and I've also gone ahead to iron. So the next thing we'll do now is to start joining. First of all, I'll remove my pattern paper from the fabric, and then I'll arrange it on the table so you see how I'll be joining them together. So here is the center front on the table. I'll arrange the 2 side fronts that would be attached to it. As you can see on the screen, this side will be joined to this side all the way to the armhole from the down, and then the other side as well. I'll repeat the same thing for the lining of the front. I'll join them together. And for the back as well, I'll open it up, arrange the center back on the table, and then I'll show you how it will be joined as well. Now here is the center back. This middle part is where our zip will be faced. So this is the 2 center back that we have. Now this is the side back that will be joined on this side and joined on the other side as well. With this, we will now have 2 pieces of our back. I'll repeat the same thing for the lining as well. This is the fabric I'm using for the lining. Now this is what we have. I've gone ahead to join the side fronts to the center front for the lining and the main fabric. So I have 2 pieces of front. Now I've also done the same thing for the back. I've joined the side back to the center back for the lining and for the fabric. So this is what we have on the table. The next thing we're going to do now is to go ahead and open up your seam and iron. This is very, very important. It gives you a neat job. Open up the seam on the inside and iron it. Both the lining, both the fabric, both the front and the back. So as you see me opening it up with my hand, use your steam iron to open it up and give it a good press. Now this is what we have after ironing. Look how neat it is on the inside and on the outside as well. Giving it a good press makes your seam very neat. So make that a habit whenever you're sewing. So now this is the back piece that I'm holding. The next thing I'm going to do is to turn the neck part of our dress. So I'll start with the back. You place the 2 good sides facing each other. Now this is the 2 back piece on the table. Place the lining facing it on top of it. Place the lining facing this other one on top of it, and I'll stitch the neck. And I'll be right back to show you. Then after stitching the neck of this back, I'll also go ahead and do the same thing for the front. Place the lining facing the main fabric, and then secure it down with a pin if you know that it's going to be shifting, especially if you're using a very weak fabric. So place the 2 good sides facing each other. Start your stitch from the beginning of the shoulder all the way down to the neck. And then when you finish, flip it to the right side and make a top stitch on the lining. Now this is what we have. I've gone ahead to turn the neck of the back and of the front. I've also top stitched and I gave it a very good press. So see how neat it is. Make ironing a habit so that you would have a very neat job. So now that we have used the lining of the back piece to turn the back and the lining of the front piece to turn the front, the next thing we're going to do now is to join our shoulder. So you place the good sides of both the back and front facing each other, and then arrange the shoulder part as you can see on your screen. Arrange it like this, the good side facing the good side of the back, and then use the back piece to turn the front on the shoulder. When I'm done with that, I'll be right back to show you guys. Now, after joining the shoulder, this is what we have. So the back and the front has been joined together. The next thing we're going to do now is to flip it to the back part and then pin down our zipper allowance. We are not joining the zipper allowance yet because that's where we would start the gathering of the down part from. So for now, we'll just use a pin to hold down the allowance you took for your zipper allowance so that you can take your body measurement on the dress. After pinning down your zipper allowance, secure it down with a pin. Now this is what we have. It is assumed we have fixed our zip. The next thing we're going to do now is to take your body measurement on the bust part, mark down what you have, divide your body measurement into 2 or into 4, depends on how you're taking it. If you're taking it from one zipper end to the other, divide it into 4. But if you're taking it at once, from one armhole to the other armhole, divide it by 2. So do the same thing on the waistline. Take your waist measurement, take your hip measurement, and then use your chalk to mark it out because that's the point that you would stitch along. So I'll go ahead and stitch these 2 sides and I'll be right back to show you guys. Now this is what we have after stitching the 2 sides. We've joined our 2 sides together. Take your measurement to be sure that you are on track. So after doing this, the next thing we're going to do is to now do the slanting on the down parts. This is why I said it's important to join before you slant to save you the stress of making any mistake. So now we're going to open up this zipper allowance part where we're going to fix our zip, but that will be after we have slanted. Next thing we're going to do now, take your tape and measure from your waistline down to where you want your slant to start from on one side. Remember, it's slanted from one side to the other. So what I'm doing now is to take my hip measurement from my waist down. Your hip measurement from your waist is 9, and then I added 2 inches. That's why I marked 11, because I want the slant to start immediately after the hip to the other side. So I'll use my curve ruler to make a curve down to the other end of the dress. So after curving it, I'll cut it off. With this, we have successfully done our slant. It's better to do it on fabric than to do it on paper to avoid mistake, because you don't know the side you're slanting on paper. The paper will be placed on the fabric to cut on fold. That's why it's not advisable to do your slanting on paper, because you're cutting on fold. So now we're done doing this. We are done with this slant. The next thing we're going to do, this is the fabric I told you we would pleat on the down part of this dress, this floral print fabric. So that's why I have not closed my zipper allowance. I'll open up that zipper allowance and I'll start pleating from one zipper allowance down to the other. This fabric is 3 yards. I measured it and I measured what I have under this place. It will be right enough. If you want a lot of gathers, buy more than 3 yards. But mine is 3 yards. So I'll just go ahead to the sewing machine now and pleat it all around, and I'll be right back to show you guys. Now this is what we have after pleating this other fabric to the upper part of the dress. For you to have a proper and equal pleating all round, it's advisable for you to fold this down fabric into 2 and notch the middle. Also, notch the midpoint of your upper dress and start from there, so that one side will not have more gathers than the other side. So I notched the midpoint of my fabric on the down part, and I also notched the midpoint of my upper part, and then I did my gathers from one side to the other. Then the next thing we'll do now is to fix our zip. Use a pin to hold down your fabric. After fixing the zip, the next thing we'll do is to sew it all the way down. Now after the zipper, we need to turn the sleeves of the dress so that we can attach it to the dress. So remember I told you that I cut 4 pieces because I'll use one to turn the other. So the curved part under is the part that we would turn, not the upper part. The upper part is the part that will be joined to the shoulder. The down part is what we are going to turn. Now this is what we have after turning. Like, make the 2 good sides face each other, make a stitch and a top stitch, and this is what you have. Very easy. The sleeve is very easy. Now notch the midpoint of this part I told you is the shoulder part. Notch the midpoint and then attach it to the dress. Now this is our dress. We have fixed our zip already. I'm going to go to the sewing machine now, place this notched part to the part where we joined on the shoulder, and then stitch it all the way down and all the way to the other, and that will be all for the dress. The zip has been fixed, the down has been pleated, and I folded the hem. You can also go ahead and weave your hem. So that will be all for this dress. Here is the result of the beautiful dress we just made. See how beautiful and neat it came out. Remember to subscribe, like and share this video. I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.